welfare system where people were working hard, paying their taxes to support people on welfare who could work but chose not to work. I think that is wrong. Here we are in London doing this interview. There were people living in houses getting housing benefit of 70, 80, 90,000 pounds a year. That was taking 4 or 5 working people all their taxes to pay for that benefit. That was wrong. It needed to change. Do we need to go on reforming welfare? Yes, we do.
Well, let's talk about 12 billion and what 12 billion is, because I think most people will find that abstract. Let's suppose you took 12 billion in a year, that's your saving, and you divided that across all the households in the country. What would it be?
Well,
roughly?
it is
roughly
half
speaking.
as much as the 21 billion that we saved in
roughly
the last...
what would it be per household in the country?
You're bamboozling me with figures now, having complained
I'm just asking,
about it.
so you don't know. Shall I tell you what it
Please
is?
do.
It would be £450 per household in the country. It's getting on for a tenner a week for every household in the country. Now, you're not going to, I don't think, spread it across all the households in the country. If it's an average of 450 for each household, and it's not going to be across all households, it's going to be like 1,000, 2,000 quid for some households. Aren't they entitled to say, aren't we all entitled to say, tell us which households are going to have this cost imposed on them?
Well, first of all, it is right to reform welfare for the reasons I've given. And also, if you want to minimise reductions in spending departments, it's important to reform welfare. Second point is, 12 billion is half of what we saved in the last Parliament, again, showing this is affordable and achievable. And the next point I'd make is we have given a very clear pledge that we're going to freeze unemployment benefit for the first 2 years of the next Parliament. Evan, can you remember at any election, any party making as difficult or clear a pledge about welfare as we're prepared to make before this election?
You are able to tell me the tax cuts in detail with specific numbers, the tax cuts you're going to make in 2018, 19 and 20, but you cannot tell me the bigger welfare cuts that you're making next year.
Well, we've set out a...
That's terribly cynical.
No, we've set out...
It's a good news.
We've set out the biggest one, as you say, of the 12 billion. The 12 billion is half of the 21 billion that we achieved in the last Parliament. But also there's this point, Evan, part of this is continuing with a programme that we've had. We have been getting people off what was called incapacity benefit and back into work, and we're going to continue with that, successfully reducing welfare
So
laws.
Incapacity benefit will go down, the bill will go down under the...
We believe, it's not called incapacity benefit anymore, but we're convinced we can go on getting people back to work.
Right.
We've said
child
we're going to
benefit,
cut
is that one going to go down? Is that going to... Do people who get child benefit, should they expect it to be going down if you win?
We've made our reforms and people can see what we've done. We've said,
for instance... You need to find 12 billion. You need to be getting 450 for every household in the country.
I've said, for instance, we're going to go on with the work we've announced about saying that young people should no longer have the option of leaving school, signing on and getting housing benefits straight away. They should be either earning or learning. If we're successful in creating the 2 million jobs in the next Parliament, just as we've created 2 million jobs in this Parliament, that is 1 million higher than the current forecast, and that will reduce the benefits bill. So there's a whole programme of work that which, if we continue with, we can continue to get welfare down.
Pity you've been in government for 5 years and you've been unable to do that work hitherto. Look, Nick Clegg, Deputy Prime Minister, says it's impossible to do what you want to do without hitting children, without hitting the poor, without hitting the disabled. You can't deny that, can you? Because you don't know where the cuts are even going to come.
Nick Clegg thought it was impossible to carry out our economic strategy and get the country back on track. We managed to persuade him it was the right thing to do.
He was Deputy Prime Minister. He joined in. He stands by all of that.
He did join in.
And he said, can you deny it'll hit the poor, the disabled, or hit children?
No, the principles we will apply is, first of all, we should protect the most vulnerable people in our country, and we have, throughout this government, protected their benefits. Second of all, we must make sure work pays. That's a crucial part.
Prime Minister, if you don't know where the cuts are, how can you say any of these things are going to be achieved, or who is going to be hurt? How can you deny that the poor, the disabled, or children will be hit? Because you don't know where the cuts are coming.
Let me finish. I'm explaining the principles we're going to apply. So you protect the poorest and most vulnerable, you make sure that work pays, and you also protect pensioners because it's more difficult for them to change their circumstances.
Does that add up to £450 per household?
Well, as I say, that is
does that get you 12 billion? But you don't know it gets you 12 billion because if you knew it got you 12 billion, you'd be able to tell us where they're coming.
I'm confident, with a track record of 5 years, where we cut welfare by 21 billion, we can now find 12 billion of savings. I'm confident that having made 120 billion pounds of adjustment in the last Parliament, we can find that further 30 billion. What we're saying here, in order to put it in context, is we've got to save 1 out of every £100 for what the government spends for 2 more years. That is the scale of what we've got to do.
Right.
It's not easy.
I just need to I need to stop you on that one, because it sounds very little when you say £1 for every 100 over 2 years. But for the bits of government that are under your control, the bits of spending, it turns out to be a great deal bigger than that, doesn't it? For working age welfare, 12 billion is a huge sum. For unprotected departments, that £1 in 100 turns out to be 15% over the Parliament.
But with respect, this is what the Labour Party and a lot of commentators warned about in 2010. They said if you go ahead with spending reductions and efficiencies, you will destroy public services in our country. That has turned out to be nonsense. We got 1 million more children in good or outstanding schools, a health service carrying out more operations and more scans and helping more people.
And people will judge the record. People will judge the record for themselves.
No,
but people will judge the record. We need to move on.
Yeah.
And people will judge the record. They've heard what you say, and they'll judge the record for themselves.
You know, we should look at the outputs of these services. Take the police. Crime is down 20%.
We're going to move
even
on.
though they've
We're going
had
to move
do
on.
it
People will judge.
honest.
People will judge the record. They'll have their own view, and it won't be on the basis of statistical brickbats, I'm sure. Look, I want to move on, and I want to give you a chance, really, to rebut what is, I think, one of the central objections people have to the Conservative Party, and it's that it's a party of the rich. You've heard this before. There's polling evidence that shows this. I can quote it to you, but let's not.
This makes me
waste
more
some.
angry
Right,
than almost
right.
anything
so
else.
good. I want to see.
Yeah.
I want to give you the chance to rebut it, and because I think it is what puts a lot of people off the party. Let me just ask you: do you agree that there are lots of deserving rich people? Right, there are lots of people who've been enterprising, successful. They've created wealth and they've earned it. Do you agree that there are a lot of rich people who are undeserving?
Well, I believe there are rich people who should pay their taxes and should make a big contribution in terms of taxes to our country. But what infuriates me so much about this is I think of what we've done. We've taken 3 million of the lowest paid people out of tax. We've got
That's
2
at the
million
bottom
more
end.
people.
I'm focusing on the top end.
But it's the people
I want to focus
at the
on the
bottom
top
end that I care about. That's what this government has been about, is more good schools for children from low-income backgrounds, getting people into work who've been unemployed. And also, the other thing...
Quite a lot of people think, yes, there's a policy there for the bottom, but they find it very distasteful that some of the people at the top, frankly, they think, are taking the mick. Now, I just wonder whether you share that view.
Yes.
You do?
Yeah, there are people who don't pay their taxes who
is it just about
should.
Is it just about taxes?
Well, I think that's a very important point, which is, you know, we've got businesses in Britain that have arranged their affairs so they don't pay taxes in Britain. And we've gone after them, the first government to introduce a diverted profit tax to make sure they pay their money.
But you're reducing it to taxes, and I'm wondering whether there isn't more to people's distaste for some of the rich than just whether they pay taxes. Let me ask you this. You once said, I feel physically sick when I think about giving votes to prisoners as being asked by the European Human Rights Court. I feel physically sick.
Yeah.
Do you feel physically sick when you see rapacious capitalists, for example, care companies telling their staff on minimum wage that they're not going to be paid for the hours they spend driving?
That I find totally offensive.
You find that offensive?
Where companies...
Property developers...
If you're going to ask me questions,
go on.
Because actually we
have
have put more investigative power into the authorities to get after these companies that don't pay the minimum wage, and there are many in the care sector, and we're actually seeing more companies pay higher penalties because of that. And I'm proud of that, because that does make me very angry when I see that.
Right, property developers who are building luxury flats rather than affordable homes, bamboozling local authorities into getting planning permission for things that are not suitable for local people.
Should be building...
To make you angry?
They should be building Look, if they've got to do what they said they're going to do. If they get planning permission for one thing and build something else, that's wrong. But property developers should be building houses. Now, that means market houses, it means affordable houses, it means starter homes, and there's a very good track record there now of homes being built and helping more people onto the housing market.
What about contractors overcharging government? You know, big contractors, big companies, lots of government contracts.
Yeah, infuriating,
my goodness. That is mad.
Yes.
Because what is interesting, Prime Minister, is that I don't think people feel they get that.
Well, I'm very glad you're giving me this opportunity.
Yes.
Look,
so do you feel physically sick?
I feel as Prime Minister, I feel directly responsible for not wasting people's money. And when
Slum
I find
landlords,
companies,
does that make you really annoyed?
Of course. But let's go back to the last one before you jump on to the next one. You know, I'm infuriated when businesses overcharge government, say for IT programs or for large projects. And again, this government's taken action.
Oh, well, it's interesting.
These are all areas where I think we've got a good record.
You've given us some anger. What I want to do now is I want to play you a clip, okay? It's a clip, it's a piece of political history.
Right.
It's 23 years old. It's back at the Conservative Party conference in 1992 when you were a junior in the party. Peter Lilley, the Social Security Secretary, gave a sort of parody of a Gilbert and Sullivan song up there, talking about the people that he wanted to deal with. Let's just have a look at that clip.
I've got a little list of benefit offenders who I'll soon be rooting out, and who never would be missed. They never would be missed. There's those who make up bogus claims in half a dozen names. There's young ladies who get pregnant just to jump the housing queue. And dads who won't support the kids of the ladies they have kissed.
Can you imagine any Conservative minister making a speech like that about people at the upper end of the income scale?
Yes.
Can you?
I can. I mean, look, well, I think we've acted. More people are paying penalty notices for underpaying their staff. We're cracking down on businesses that overcharge government. The richest, back to tax, but the richest 1% in our country pay 27% of total income tax, which is a higher percentage than was the case under Labour.
Partly a reflection, of course, of how rich they are.
Well,
and how
also
much they
we've
earn.
charged foreigners stamp duty on expensive properties in London for the first time. We've made sure they pay capital gains tax, which they didn't do before. I've led an entire world effort through the G8 to make sure we crack down on tax evasion and aggressive tax avoidance by getting countries to share tax information.
One of the things, ever since that speech, that Peter Lilley speech, there has been this image of the Conservative Party as the nasty party, hasn't there? Picking on the poor, focusing on welfare recipients. Do you think that has been a problem? Would someone be able to make that speech now?
Well,
has your party changed?
That is not what I see as the Conservative Party. I see as the Conservative Party a group of people who are passionately patriotic about our country, who believe that conservative policies can actually help the poorest and those with least in our country, because we want education and schools that give people the chance to make the most of their talents. We want to create an economy that creates well-paid jobs and careers.
So that speech wouldn't be made now?
Well, I think someone would make a speech today rightly about how we need to make sure welfare isn't wasted.
But not like that. Well, it's the tone I'm talking about here.
Tone is important, I accept. But look, there'll be people watching this programme who go out, who work damn hard every day. They pay their taxes. They don't pay their taxes so that people who can work choose not to. The reward sometimes for irresponsible behaviour can drive people mad, can drive me mad, and that's one of the reasons to reform welfare.
Look, last question. Since 1992, in fact, since that speech, the Conservative Party hasn't properly won an election, hasn't won a majority in the House of Commons. Why do you think that is the case?
I think you have to take each election in turn. I think at the last election, when we came close, I think, frankly, people were very worried about the state of the economy. We were teetering on the brink, and they weren't fully sure we had all the ideas and plans. What I would say is this time, people can see a track record, an economy turned around, more people in work, the deficit paid down, Britain on the brink of something special, turning that good economic news into good news and a good future for you and your family. And this time, I believe they can put their trust in me and in the Conservative Party to deliver that better future for the country.
And if you win in having the most seats and you don't have a majority, will you feel that's a failure or a success?
Oh, I'm going for a majority. We are only 23 seats short. And if I fall short of those 23 seats, I will feel I have not succeeded in what I want to achieve. And it's not about me. This is actually about people's jobs, people's livelihoods, the chance of a better future. And I think the country, frankly, right now wants a majority government, a decisive government, a government that's fully accountable. And there is this fear, rightly, that if we don't get that, we could end up with Ed Miliband, propped up by the SNP, really wrecking this country, and that frightens me.
Prime Minister, thank you very much.
The leader debates continue next week when Evan Davis interviews Labour leader Ed Miliband. That's on Monday night at 7:30.